it's Jessica again, and I have another spooky ghost story for you that is true based on something that I lived through when I was in my mid 20s. So, when I had had my first son and he was about 2 months old, we moved into this apartment complex. And it was a nice enough place in a nice enough town. I mean, the apartment complex, it's like any of them. They have their ups and their downs, their issues and their benefits. And I remember when we were offered this apartment, how great it felt because there was this huge balcony, I guess patio more so. We were on the ground floor, but we got to be on the ground floor. There was a patio, which was really nice, that went out from our bedroom. And I remember just feeling like this was going to be a great start. This was going to be, a wonderful experience. And at the time I was in a relationship, so I was able to just be a stay-at-home mom. And I was so happy because at the time we had been living at my parents' house. And so, 2-month-old baby, being able to finally be in my own place, feel like I can make my own home, it was a wonderful feeling. So we move in. And I remember when we moved in, the first thing I noticed, because we had toured the apartment before, obviously, we signed the paperwork. And when we toured the apartment, I didn't notice anything about the place, really, other than, what I had already stated. And so when we moved in and finally started putting things away, getting, unpacked, getting all the boxes in and really starting to make it a home, I noticed on the back patio, right basically where the fence is that separates the patio from the general walkway of the apartments, I noticed that there was a bullet casing. And I thought that was really strange. But I was like, maybe somebody was walking by, dropped it. But again, it's an apartment complex. And like I said, it was in a decent enough neighborhood. I hadn't heard about any real crime in this area, other than the normal stuff. When you live in a suburb off of a huge metropolis city, there's bound to be a little crime, okay, no matter what. But at the end of the day, this was a safe enough complex and it was a completely fenced in place. So I felt like it was generally safe, and I kind of just pushed it out of my mind. Thought, nothing more of it really. Well, then weird stuff did start happening in that apartment. And I remember cabinets would open on their own, and I would end up walking into rooms and it would feel absolutely freezing. And it didn't make sense because the other rooms felt nice and toasty warm, but the bathroom, for instance, that was actually the coldest room in the house. And even though it didn't have any windows and it had a vent where the heater, would kick on and stuff, for some reason that room was just insanely cold. And I could never really figure it out, but I just figured, that happens sometimes. Bathrooms get cold. It is what it is. It's not the end of the world. And we were paying a really decent rate for having a 2-bedroom apartment. Again, we're talking, almost 10 years ago. But I was paying $800 for an apartment, which, back then was a little steep, but still a decent price. So I wasn't about to complain about a room being a little cold, whatever, big deal. And then I started noticing even more stuff, more so feelings of foreboding, feelings of sadness. After being in that apartment for a few months, and I didn't want to blame it on the apartment, right? Me and my boyfriend at the time, we weren't on excellent terms. We just had a baby, and if anyone has had a kid, you know how stressful that can be, So we were trying to make things work, but we always seemed to be at each other's throats, and we were always arguing and always fighting and bickering. And again, this is now an ex, so a lot has happened since then. But I remember when we were in this place feeling like there was always this real heavy tension. And it just felt like sometimes there would be these moments where I would just be overcome with this extreme sadness. And I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't postpartum depression. It would be random moments where I would just be overcome with this complete, just heart-wrenching, I want to end it all sadness. And I could not figure out why, because I guess I've dealt with anxiety and a little bit of depression in my life, but I've never gotten to the point where I've actually considered harming myself. Okay, I've never been that type of person. I like to preserve life as much as possible. I don't want to end it. But, everyone who's ever been stressed and has kids and a job and responsibilities, you know how it is. So anyway, as we're, adjusting to life and trying to live in this place, I finally made some friends in the apartment complex. And one of them, he was this really nice guy who happened to live, he could see my apartment from his, which meant I could see his from mine. And so we became just like great buddies. He was wonderful. I became great friends with his wife. Like, we had this awesome like neighbor friendship, which was great. And I remember that he told me, and maybe, I'd kind of had a feeling something was up. But again, I'm trying not to knock a great deal of an apartment. So I just was, not really saying much. But he told me that people were talking about my apartment, that he'd heard some gossiping, some musings, if you will, about goings on that had happened in my apartment. And I, of course, was like, well, what do you mean? Well, what happened? And so he told me the story. And it's kind of the reason, I guess, nobody really like talked to me, because maybe I was living there and they didn't want to freak me out. But I guess the last person who'd stayed in that apartment for more than like a couple of months, he was in a relationship with this woman and was engaged and happy as can be, I guess, according to whoever. And he told me that they broke up, I guess, and she left him. And all of a sudden, nobody saw him for like a couple of weeks. I guess he went MIA, none of the neighbors saw him, whatever. And then when they did see him again, he seemed like super happy. And the people that knew him and knew what he was going through thought that was weird. Why would he be so happy? He was going through this huge breakup. Maybe they got back together. You never know. It does happen. People reconcile. And especially if you love each other, sometimes, you need a break and then you get back together. Anyway, but I guess after that, nobody saw him for like a couple of months. Come time where they're about to evict him because I guess he wasn't paying rent at this time or something happened, but they finally came to evict him, and they found him in the bathroom with a certain injury to his head that was created by a specific instrument used sometimes in hunting. Not going to really specify what, but apparently in that bathroom is where he decided to meet his untimely end. And the mirror in the bathroom had never been changed, had never been altered. So the entire time I'm living there, I'm living in an apartment where a guy did something to himself. And I really didn't know anything about it. Anyway, to wrap up, because I know this is a long video, we were able to move out, got out of there. And I remember that the night that I finally left, because I just had this I didn't want to leave. Something about the apartment I was just drawn to. I was like, I do not want to leave this place. But obviously we were leaving. And so when we got out and eventually we're driving away, I remember my neighbor friend, he texted me and he was like, hey, are you still at the apartment? I thought you guys left. You told me goodbye. And I was like, yeah, we're already gone. And he's like, did you leave lights on? And I'm like, no, we turned off all the lights because we don't want extra bills, obviously, when we're not using the electricity. And he straight up was like, well, that's weird because all the lights are on and there's a guy standing in the window and he's just standing there and he's not moving. So to wrap up, all this happened when I was living in this apartment, and I didn't think anything of it at the time, but going back, I remember the first time we toured that apartment, I couldn't believe I didn't think about it. She straight up, the woman who showed us the apartment, straight up asked me, so I just want to let you know that somebody did pass away in this unit, and do you want to know how? And I said no because of how great the deal was. And looking back now, I should have said yes, because if I had, I could have saved myself years of grief and dealing with constant beratement of emotions and feeling like my life was fleeting. And I don't even know if whatever energy there caused, my relationship to end. But no matter what, that apartment, seriously, something was wrong there. And after I left, because I told management what happened, they changed the mirror. And then after they changed the mirror, they could finally get a tenant who wouldn't leave. So you never know what's going to be hidden in mirrors after somebody's passed.